Karen Wilkins stood frozen in her driveway, mouth agape, as flames engulfed what remained of Dr. Mitchell's miniature helicopter. Not a toy, mind you, an actual functioning personal aircraft that her neighbor had the audacity to park in his driveway. The bright orange flames reflected in her wide eyes, dancing like the victory she felt in her chest. "That'll teach him to ignore Sunnyvale Estate's bylaws," she whispered, clutching her HOA rulebook to her chest like a holy text. The problem wasn't that she had reported the helicopter. It was that nobody had done anything about it. 3 complaint forms, 2 emergency HOA meetings, and 1 strongly worded petition later, Dr. Mitchell's helicopter remained gleaming in the sun, mocking her authority as homeowner association president. So Karen had taken matters into her own hands. A bit of gasoline, a kitchen match, and now sweet, sweet justice was ablaze in front of her, until she heard sirens in the distance. "Mrs. Wilkins?" A man's voice made her jump. She turned to find Dr. Mitchell standing behind her, his cell phone in hand, recording everything. "Would you like to explain to the police why my FAA-registered aircraft is currently on fire in my driveway?" Karen felt the blood drain from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The gas can in your hand says otherwise," Dr. Mitchell replied, his voice eerily calm. "You do realize this is a felony, right? Destruction of aircraft is a federal crime." The wail of sirens grew louder as 2 police cars and a fire truck rounded the corner of Sunnyvale Estates. But the rules clearly state no vehicles exceeding 8 feet in height. Karen's voice cracked as she waved her rulebook. Page 47, Section 12, Paragraph 3. "My helicopter is 7 feet, 9 inches tall, Karen. I measured specifically to comply with your ridiculous rules." As the police officers approached, Karen could see neighbors emerging from their homes, smartphones aimed directly at her. The hashtag NHOA Karen would be trending locally within the hour. "Ma'am, please put down the gas can and place your hands where I can see them," one officer commanded. In that moment, Karen realized she had made a catastrophic error in judgment. Her perfect neighborhood, her perfect reputation, her perfect life, all of it was about to go up in smoke, just like Dr. Mitchell's helicopter. "This is all a misunderstanding," she stammered, backing away slightly. "I'm the president of the Homeowner Association. I enforce the rules here." "And I enforce the law, ma'am," the officer replied, which currently appears to include arson, destruction of property, and possibly federal aviation violations. As they placed handcuffs on her wrists, Karen caught sight of Brenda Thompson, her HOA vice president and supposed friend, already huddled with other board members in what was clearly an emergency succession meeting. "You can't do this," Karen called out to them. "I dedicated 7 years to this community." But no one moved to help her as she was guided into the back of the police car, the flames of her handiwork still casting an orange glow across the immaculate lawns of Sunnyvale Estates. The fluorescent lights of the county courthouse hummed above Karen's head as she sat rigidly beside her lawyer, a young public defender who seemed more interested in his coffee than her case. 3 weeks had passed since the incident, as her husband David had taken to calling it. 3 weeks of neighborhood whispers, newspaper headlines, and the utter humiliation of having to surrender her HOA presidential keycard. "The state versus Karen Wilkins," announced the bailiff. Karen straightened her spine and lifted her chin. She had chosen her outfit carefully. A conservative navy pantsuit that screamed respectable community leader, not helicopter arsonist. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and no patience for nonsense, peered down at Karen. "Mrs. Wilkins, you're charged with criminal mischief, arson, and destruction of property. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Karen replied with as much dignity as she could muster. "This is clearly a neighborhood dispute that has been blown out of proportion." Her lawyer winced beside her at the unauthorized addition. "State it for your defense, Mrs. Wilkins," the judge replied, not bothering to hide her distaste. As the prosecutor outlined the case, Karen's mind drifted to how quickly her life had unraveled. David had barely spoken to her since her arrest. Their son Tyler had postponed his planned visit home from college, and her carefully cultivated social circle had collapsed like a house of cards. "Your Honor," the prosecutor was saying, "we have video evidence of Mrs. Wilkins not only setting fire to the aircraft, but openly admitting to doing so because of a supposed HOA violation." "It was a violation," Karen blurted, unable to stop herself. "Mrs. Wilkins," the judge warned. "Sorry, Your Honor," she said, not feeling sorry at all. How could no one understand? She had dedicated her life to maintaining property values and neighborhood standards. The helicopter was an eyesore, a disruption to the harmony she had worked so hard to create. After setting a trial date, the judge fixed Karen with a stern look. "Mrs. Wilkins, as a condition of your continued release, you are to have no contact with Dr. Mitchell or any member of the Sunnyvale Estates HOA board." Karen felt as if she'd been slapped. "But, Your Honor, I live there. I'm the president." "Former president," her lawyer corrected quietly. You can continue to reside in your home, but you are not to participate in any HOA activities or attempt to enforce any HOA regulations, the judge clarified. Are we clear? Karen nodded stiffly, her fingers itching for her rulebook, her sanctuary in times of chaos. As she left the courthouse, a small crowd of reporters waited on the steps. Among them stood Brenda Thompson, now wearing Karen's former presidential blazer, complete with the custom Sunnyvale HOA president pin that Karen had special ordered from Etsy. Mrs. Wilkins, is it true you burned the helicopter because Dr. Mitchell refused your romantic advances? Shouted one reporter. What? No, that's absurd, Karen gasped. Sources say you've had over 30 homeowners cited for violations in the past month alone. Would you consider yourself a regulation addict? Karen pushed past them, her face burning with humiliation. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She was supposed to be the hero of Sunnyvale Estates, not its villain. Karen pulled into her driveway, wishing she could simply dissolve into the leather seats of her immaculately maintained Volvo. The dashboard clock read 3:47 p.m., the exact time she would normally be conducting her daily neighborhood patrol. Instead, she was coming home from a mandated anger management class where she'd spent 2 hours in a circle with people who had actual problems. Unlike her perfectly reasonable desire for order and compliance, a flash of yellow caught her eye as she stepped out of her car. A citation. On her own mailbox. Violation. Mailbox post paint does not match approved Sunnyvale TAN number 457. Please remedy within 72 hours to avoid further action. Karen snatched the paper, her hands trembling with rage. Her mailbox had always been Sunnyvale TAN number 457. She had personally selected the color 7 years ago when the Edgewood Board approved the standardized mailbox ordinance. The signature at the bottom made her blood boil. Brenda Thompson, HOA president. Karen stormed to her garage, located her paint supplies, and marched back to the mailbox with a color swatch in hand. Holding it against the post, she squinted in the afternoon sun. It was Sunnyvale TAN number 457, exactly as specified. Exactly. Enjoying the taste of your own medicine, Karen? Dr. Mitchell stood at the edge of her property, arms folded across his chest. Where his helicopter had once been parked now stood a bright red sports car with custom flame decals along the sides. You're violating the restraining order by speaking to me, Karen said icily, tucking the citation into her pocket. Actually, I'm keeping a distance of more than 50 feet and simply engaging in neighborly conversation, he replied. Nice citation, by the way. First one? This is harassment, Karen hissed, stepping toward him before catching herself. My mailbox is the correct color. Is it? Funny how subjective these things can be, he said with exaggerated thoughtfulness. Almost like the time you cited me for grass that was 2.7 inches when the maximum allowed was 2.5 inches. Karen's mind raced back to that citation, one of many she'd issued to Dr. Mitchell before the incident. Had she been overzealous? No. Rules were rules. Your helicopter violated height restrictions, she said through gritted teeth. No, it didn't. And now you've got a federal case and a neighborhood that's finally standing up to you. He gestured around the cul-de-sac, where neighbors who would normally have waved now conspicuously avoided looking her way. As Dr. Mitchell walked away, Karen noticed other small changes throughout the neighborhood. A garden gnome that would have never been permitted before, a basketball hoop attached to a garage, wind chimes tinkling from a front porch. The neighborhood was slipping into chaos without her firm guidance. Inside her house, she found David packing a suitcase. What are you doing? She commanded. Taking some time, Karen, he said without looking up. I'm going to stay with my brother for a while. Because of one mistake. I was doing my job. David sighed, finally meeting her eyes. It wasn't your job to commit arson. And it's not just one mistake. It's years of watching you become someone I don't recognize, someone obsessed with control and rules to the point of, he gestured vaguely. This. So you're abandoning me when I need you most, when the whole neighborhood has turned against me. The neighborhood hasn't turned against you, Karen. They're just finally living without fear of your next citation. He zipped his suitcase. I love you, but I don't like who you've become. Call me when you're ready to talk about that. As the front door closed behind him, Karen stood alone in her perfect living room with its perfectly arranged furniture and perfectly coordinated throw pillows, wondering how her perfectly planned life had fallen so spectacularly apart. Karen stared at the email on her laptop screen, reading it for the fourth time as if repetition might somehow change its contents. From Sunnyvale Estates HR Committee. Subject, termination of employment. Dear Ms. Wilkins, we regret to inform you that your position as Director of Community Standards for Sunnyvale Management Company has been terminated, effective immediately. She had worked for the management company that oversaw Sunnyvale Estates and 3 other communities for nearly a decade. The role had been perfect, allowing her to transform her passion for order into a career. Now, with one impulsive act, she had lost everything: her job, her marriage, temporarily, she insisted to herself, and her standing in the community. The doorbell rang, interrupting her spiral of self-pity. Karen approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to find a young woman with a tablet and a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Wilkins, I'm Zoe Chen from Channel 8 News. I was hoping to get your side of the helicopter incident for our Beyond the Headlines segment." Karen's first instinct was to refuse, to hide away until the humiliation passed. But something in her bristled at the thought of Brenda Thompson and her cronies controlling the narrative. "I suppose it's time someone heard the truth," Karen said, opening the door wider. 10 minutes later, Karen was seated in her living room, a microphone clipped to her blouse, telling her story. "The neighborhood has standards for a reason," she explained earnestly. "Before I became president, people were installing unauthorized bird baths and painting their shutters whatever colors they wanted. Property values were at risk. And Dr. Mitchell's helicopter?" Zoe prompted. "It was an egregious violation," Karen replied automatically, then paused. "But I should have handled it differently." This small admission, the first crack in her righteous armor, surprised even Karen herself. "Would you say you went too far in enforcing the rules?" Zoe asked. Karen opened her mouth to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, unwelcome tears filled her eyes. "I just wanted everything to be perfect," she whispered. "Is that so wrong?" Our viewers might be interested to know that since your departure from the HOA, Sunnyvale Estates has seen a 15% increase in community activities, Zoe said. The new board has approved a community garden, monthly food truck nights, and they've relaxed several aesthetic regulations. Karen felt physically ill. "They're destroying everything I built." "Or perhaps they're building something new," Zoe suggested gently, "something that values community over conformity." After the interview, Karen stood in her front yard watching the news van drive away. Across the street, new neighbors were moving in. A young couple with a toddler, and to Karen's horror, a large dog that was most certainly above the weight limit previously enforced. She waited for the familiar surge of indignation, the righteous anger that had fueled her for so long. Instead, she felt oddly hollow. That evening, sitting alone with a glass of wine, Karen clicked on a notification from the neighborhood social media group, a group she'd once ruled with an iron fist, removing inappropriate posts about political yard signs or unauthorized garage sales. The newest post showed photos from the first Sunnyvale Food Truck Friday. Families sprawled on blankets on the community green space, children with ice cream-smeared faces, neighbors laughing together. Karen zoomed in on one photo and saw Dr. Mitchell, his arm around a woman she didn't recognize, both of them looking carefree. Was this what community looked like without her rules? Karen sat rigid beside her new lawyer, a sharply dressed woman named Valerie, whom David had reluctantly agreed to pay for. The public defender had been woefully unprepared for the media circus her case had become after her Channel 8 interview went viral, spawning dozens of "Ho Karen" memes and a particularly unflattering TikTok dance challenge. "Mrs. Wilkins, your client has heard the prosecution's evidence," Judge Martinez addressed Valerie. "Would you like to change your plea at this time?" Valerie leaned over to whisper in Karen's ear. "The prosecutor is offering a deal. Plead guilty to criminal mischief, all other charges dropped. 6 months probation, community service, and restitution for the helicopter. No jail time." Karen swallowed hard. The evidence was damning, not just Dr. Mitchell's video, but security footage from 3 different neighbors' cameras showing her approach with the gas can. "I'll take the deal," Karen whispered back. After the formalities were completed, Karen stood on the courthouse steps, feeling oddly lighter. The media had mostly dispersed after learning she wouldn't be serving a dramatic prison sentence. Only one reporter remained, looking bored. "Mrs. Wilkins?" Karen turned to find a small, elderly woman with impeccably styled silver hair approaching her. "I'm Virginia Holcomb from Oak Ridge Meadows," a woman said. "I wonder if I might have a word." Karen vaguely recognized the name of the luxury development across town, a gated community for the truly wealthy, not just the comfortably upper middle class like Sunnyvale. "I've been following your case with interest," Virginia continued, guiding Karen to a nearby bench. "Your dedication to standards is impressive." Karen searched for sarcasm in the woman's tone, but found none. "Not everyone would agree with you," Karen replied cautiously. "Community leadership is often thankless," Virginia said with a knowing smile, "but some of us recognize the importance of maintaining certain expectations." As their conversation unfolded, Karen learned that Oak Ridge Meadows was facing an unexpected threat: a proposal to build affordable housing on adjacent land. The current HOA board was, in Virginia's words, distressingly passive about fighting it. "We need someone with your determination," Virginia explained. "Someone who understands that preserving community standards sometimes requires bold action." "Are you offering me a job?" Karen asked incredulously. "A fresh start," Virginia corrected. a place where your talents would be appreciated rather than vilified. The offer was tempting. More than tempting, it was validation when Karen desperately needed it. These people understood her. They saw her not as Hevoa Karen, but as a guardian of property values and community aesthetics. As Virginia handed her a business card with an address and time for a meeting, Karen felt hope stirring for the first time in months. That evening, as she researched Oak Ridge Meadows online, Karen's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Dr. Mitchell's girlfriend, the woman from the food truck photo. "I'm Lisa," the woman said. "I'm an attorney specializing in housing rights." Karen started to close the door, but Lisa's next words stopped her. "I know about the Oak Ridge Meadows offer, Karen, and I think you should know what you're really being recruited for." Against her better judgment, Karen let her in. "They're not just fighting affordable housing," Lisa explained, spreading documents across Karen's kitchen table. "They're engaged in systematic housing discrimination, and they want you to be their public face, their fault person if things go wrong." Karen examined the evidence Lisa presented, emails, meeting minutes, statistical analyses showing troubling patterns in application approvals. "Why are you telling me this?" Karen asked suspiciously. "Because I think you're not actually a bad person," Lisa replied. "Misguided, yes. Obsessive about rules, definitely. But I don't think you're someone who would knowingly participate in housing discrimination." As Lisa left, Karen sat surrounded by papers, faced with a choice that would define whatever remained of her reputation, and perhaps, more importantly, who she truly was beneath the. Karen parked her Volvo a block away from Oak Ridge Meadows clubhouse, feeling like a spy in a poorly written thriller. The manila envelope on her passenger seat contained every document Lisa had provided, plus additional information Karen had discovered during her own late-night research sessions. Virginia Holcomb had been explicit in her follow-up calls. Karen would be the new community standards consultant with a generous salary, a company car, and a subsidized condominium within the development. All she needed to do was apply her particular talents to ensuring the right sort of people maintained the community's character. The coded language had once seemed merely about protecting property values. Now, with Lisa's evidence and her own digging, Karen understood the uglier truth beneath the manicured lawns and architectural review committees. Taking a deep breath, Karen tucked a small recording device on loan from Lisa into her blazer pocket and walked toward the clubhouse where the Oak Ridge board waited. "Karen, darling." Virginia air-kissed both her cheeks. "Everyone, this is Karen Wilkins, the woman I was telling you about." 6 board members sat around a mahogany table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to thinly veiled skepticism. "Mrs. Wilkins, Virginia speaks highly of your commitment to community standards," said a balding man who introduced himself as the board president. "Though your methods have been somewhat controversial. Sometimes maintaining standards requires difficult decisions," Karen replied, echoing Virginia's earlier words back to her. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in euphemism. No one explicitly mentioned race, income levels, or family structures. Instead, they spoke of community fit, appropriate backgrounds, and maintaining the established character of Oak Ridge. When they showed her the pending applications for the few available properties, complete with notes about which ones should be discouraged through process complications, Karen activated the recorder. "So just to be clear," she said carefully, "you want me to find rule violations for certain applicants but not others based on these notes?" "We prefer to think of it as applying heightened scrutiny where community fit is questionable," Virginia replied smoothly. For 45 minutes, Karen encouraged them to elaborate on their selection process, asking innocent-sounding questions that prompted increasingly explicit answers. By the time they offered her a contract, she had everything Lisa needed. "I'll need to review this overnight," Karen said, patting the contract folder. "But I think we're going to work very well together." Outside in the parking lot, Virginia caught up with her. "You won't regret this, Karen. You're among people who understand you now." Karen looked at this immaculately dressed woman with her practiced smile and felt a chill. "Is that what you see when you look at me? Someone like you?" "Of course, dear. We're cut from the same cloth." For months, Karen had fought against her Hello Karen image, insisting to herself that she was misunderstood, that her dedication to rules was about community betterment, not power or prejudice. Now, reflected in Virginia's calculating eyes, she saw what others had seen in her all along. "I'll be in touch," Karen said neutrally, leaving Virginia standing confidently in the spa-like lighting of Oak Ridge's exclusive community center. Back in her car, Karen removed the recording device and stared at it for a long moment before making a call. "Lisa, I got everything. But I need to know something first. Why help me? Why not just approach Oak Ridge directly?" "Because they deny everything," Lisa replied. "We needed someone they thought was on their side, someone they trust with their real agenda." "Someone with my reputation," Karen concluded quietly. "Yes," Lisa admitted, "but also someone who might want redemption." After ending the call, Karen sat in her car, watching the sun set over Oak Ridge Meadows' perfectly uniform rooflines. For the first time in forever, she questioned whether perfection was really what made a community worthwhile. Community standards consultant caught in housing discrimination sting read the headline of the West Side Chronicle. Karen's phone had been ringing nonstop since the story broke, with calls from everyone from old Sunnyvale neighbors to national news outlets. She had expected to feel exposed, perhaps even more vilified than before. Instead, as Lisa's housing rights organization publicly acknowledged Karen's role in gathering evidence against Oak Ridge Meadows' discriminatory practices, the narrative around Hoa Karen began to shift. Karen sat in her attorney's office watching Virginia Holcomb and the entire Oak Ridge board being led into the federal courthouse on the local news. Their expressions of betrayal when they realized who had exposed them had been almost worth the months of humiliation Karen had endured. "The district attorney wants to make a formal statement thanking you," Valerie informed her. "It could go a long way toward rehabilitation of your public image." Karen shook her head. "I didn't do it for my image." And the surprising thing was she meant it. Something had changed in Karen since that moment in the Oak Ridge parking lot. A fundamental shift in how she viewed herself and her life's purpose. As she left the attorney's office, Karen found Dr. Mitchell waiting by her car. "This is unexpected," she said cautiously. "I saw the news," he replied. "What you did, it took courage." Karen had rehearsed an apology to this man hundreds of times in her head over the past months, but now that he stood before her, the carefully crafted words evaporated. "I'm sorry I burned your helicopter," she said simply. "It was inexcusable." Dr. Mitchell nodded, the ghost of the smile playing at his lips. "It certainly made for an interesting neighborhood story." "Is it? Could it be repaired?" Karen asked hesitantly. "Insurance covered most of it. I'll be flying again soon." He paused. "Actually, that's partly why I wanted to talk to you. The community center is having an open house this weekend. Lisa suggested that you might want to come." Karen blinked in surprise. "To Sunnyvale? Won't people be uncomfortable?" "Probably," he admitted. "But community isn't just about comfort, is it? Sometimes it's about growth. Change, second chances." As Dr. Mitchell walked away, Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. The desire to be part of something, rather than in control of it. When Saturday arrived, Karen stood at the edge of the Sunnyvale Community Green, watching families set up picnic blankets and children racing across the grass that would have violated at least 3 of her previous regulations on proper lawn use. Brenda Thompson spotted her first, her expression freezing momentarily before she approached. "I didn't expect to see you here," Brenda said, her tone neutral. "Dr. Mitchell invited me," Karen replied. "I can leave if—" "No," Brenda interrupted. "Actually, I've been meaning to call you. The board has been discussing the discrimination case you helped with." Karen waited for the other shoe to drop for some cutting remark about her hypocrisy. "We're establishing a committee focused on genuine community improvement rather than just aesthetic enforcement," Brenda continued. "Given your unique perspective and recent actions, some of us thought you might have valuable input." Karen stared at her former friend in disbelief. "You're offering me a role on the HOA again?" "A very different role," Brenda clarified. "One focused on inclusion rather than exclusion. No citation power whatsoever." As they talked, other neighbors gradually approached. Some were cordial, others merely curious, a few openly wary. But no one demanded she leave. No one treated her as the pariah she had expected to be forever. Later, as twilight fell and string lights illuminated the community space, Karen found herself sitting beside Lisa and Dr. Mitchell, watching impromptu dancing to music from a local band. "I still don't understand why you gave me a chance," Karen said to Lisa. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to become more than their worst moment," Lisa replied, her eyes on the diverse group of neighbors enjoying the evening together. Even at HOA Karen's. For the first time in months, Karen laughed, really laughed at herself and the absurdity of how far she had come. 6 months after the Oak Ridge Meadows case concluded, Karen stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting the lapel of her blazer. Not her old HOA presidential blazer with its authoritative cut and power buttons, but something softer, more approachable. Today marked her first official day as Community Outreach Coordinator for the Sunnyvale Residents Alliance, the newly formed alternative to the traditional HOA. "You ready for this?" David asked from the doorway. He had moved back home 3 months ago, after what he called seeing the real Karen again. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if they're just setting you up to fail?" "Then you fail," he said simply. "And you try something else. The world doesn't end because Karen Wilkins makes a mistake." This new perspective that imperfection wasn't catastrophic still felt foreign to her. But she was learning. The community center was buzzing when Karen arrived. The newly formed alliance focused less on rule enforcement and more on actual community building, childcare exchanges, carpools, skill-sharing workshops, and inclusive events. Today's agenda included finalizing plans for welcoming the residents of the new affordable housing development that would soon border Sunnyvale, a project Karen was now actively supporting. Karen, over here, called Brenda, waving from a table where several residents were reviewing building plans. Among them sat Dr. Mitchell and Lisa, now openly a couple and co-chairs of the welcoming committee. As Karen joined them, she noticed a new face, a young woman with vibrant blue hair who would have triggered multiple citation notices under the old regime. "This is Amara," Brenda introduced. "She'll be moving into the new development next month. She's a graphic designer and has some ideas for inclusive community signage." "It's nice to meet you," Karen said, meaning it. "I'd love to hear your ideas." As the meeting progressed, Karen found herself genuinely engaged in discussions about making Sunnyvale more welcoming rather than more regulated. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had found greater purpose in building bridges than walls. After the meeting, Karen walked home alone, taking the long route through the neighborhood she had once patrolled with her citation pad. Gardens now displayed personality rather than conformity. Children's toys occasionally dotted front yards. A surprising number of lawn gnomes had appeared, almost as if in celebration of her downfall. Yet despite all these former violations, property values in Sunnyvale had actually increased over the past year. Turns out people wanted to live in communities that felt alive, not sterile. As Karen rounded the corner to her street, she spotted a familiar figure in Dr. Mitchell's driveway, the repaired helicopter, gleaming in the afternoon sun as he polished its rotors. "Taking it up today?" she called from a respectful distance. "Just finished the last FAA inspection," he confirmed. "Want to see it?" Karen hesitated only briefly before crossing the street. "I promised not to bring matches this time." Dr. Mitchell laughed, the last of the old tension between them finally dissolving. "Actually, I was wondering if you might want to go up sometime. See the neighborhood from a different perspective." "I think I've already started doing that," Karen replied with a small smile. "But yes, I'd like that." As she continued toward her house, Karen noticed a citation on her mailbox, a bright yellow paper that made her heart skip momentarily until she read it. Violation. Failure to bring cookies to last community meeting. Remedy. Must bring double portions to next week's gathering. Fine. One neighborly conversation with someone new. It was signed with a smiley face and Dr. Mitchell's initials. Karen plucked the paper from her mailbox, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her pocket. Some rules she was learning existed to bring people together rather than keep them in line. And perhaps that had been the point all along, a point she had missed in her quest for perfect lawns and regulation-compliant mailboxes.